Hi friends! Welcome to Cinematire. Today we're going to discuss Lovecraft Country, my favorite show of 2020. This is your future. How will you dress it? I'm Samantha Ray. This is a series where I, a fashion designer, discuss costuming in science fiction media. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. Instead of doing a breakdown of the show, I'm going to be doing a breakdown of all of the different characters, because they all sort of have their own capsule collection that really expresses who they are. The costume designer Dana Pink did a really good job of finding their voice through clothing. This is going to be a two-parter. This episode is going to deal with 5 characters in the main cast, plus a bunch of the side characters that don't really have like names or anything. And then the next episode is going to deal with the other main characters, plus historical figures and fictional characters that sort of were dropped in here and there. That being said, expect massive spoilers. Lovecraft Country is an American horror drama television show developed by Misha Green, based on and serving as a continuation of the 2016 novel of the same name by Matt Ruff. So the narrative turns the genre on its head because H.P. Lovecraft was a huge racist, and if you know anything about him, he didn't hide it, and he was even kind of racist for the time. His friends and colleagues were like, dude, you gotta dial back the racism just like a little bit. If you don't know, look up what he named his cat. So it turns the genre on its head by making his kind of cosmic horror type of stories from the point of view of Black Americans, which I feel like he would just hate. The series is heavily cosmic horror and science fiction, but it puts it squarely in the Jim Crow era. So we have scary elements that are normal horror stuff, but we see mostly horror of how humans treat each other. I think what I love about the show is the fact that it's so lovingly crafted by everybody from the directors, producers, writers, even Matt Ruff. You can tell in interviews by him how much he liked what they did with his source material, the actors, the costumes, the sets. You can tell how much just tiny little details went into it. And I promise you'll fall down a rabbit hole once you start looking it up, because I know I did. Today we're going to discuss Atticus Freeman, Letitia effing Lewis, George Freeman, Montrose Freeman, and Ruby Baptiste. We follow a group of main characters, and even though you want to assume that Atticus, or Tick as they call him in the show, is like the hero, the main character, all of them have equally important roles to play. So even though he's our chosen one, everyone else is important too. So it could actually be any of those characters' stories. It's just that initially we focus on Tick. He's the boy next door, the wholesome army vet. He's plain Americana. He's simple and easy. To me, he kind of looks like illustrations of John Henry with really tight t-shirts, really fitted kind of high-waisted pants. But he's very plain. Like, so the costume designer, Dana Pink, she found this shirt, just this t-shirt. If I remember correctly, it's the shirt he's wearing in the first scene when he wakes up on the bus and he's just had a nightmare. But it's just this well-worn vintage t-shirt. And one thing that's kind of interesting about him wearing mostly t-shirts is up until World War II, t-shirts were pretty much just worn as undergarments, but the soldiers started wearing them as lounge-about normal clothing. And so a lot of the stuff that we know today as like lounge clothing, it was kind of brought into popular culture because of soldiers and soldiers coming home. So it makes sense that he would have this kind of comfy, cozy, easy to wear, what he would wear on his off days in the barracks kind of look to him. One of the things that's pretty great about Tick as a protagonist, especially a Black protagonist, is he's a geek. We see him wearing glasses. he's not so much ashamed of his glasses, but you see other people make fun of him for wearing glasses, even when he comes home from the war, like a swole soldier come home from war and he's wearing glasses and they're like, is that Atticus Freeman who wears the Coke bottle glasses?
What's that? Who, Tick? Past Tick? Skinny glasses kid who was too smart for his own good, Tick? Yeah, he's grown up.
And it's like, oh, is it weak to see? Anyway, he's unashamed of his love of science fiction and horror. His uncle encourages him to love those things. Even though his dad is an abusive jerk, and I'll get to that, all three of the Freeman men love to read. And so seeing Tick as this man who, even though it was kind of like bashed down to keep his emotions at bay, he's unapologetically a scholarly geek. And I love seeing Tick in these you know, scholarly glasses. I think it's a really clever costume choice. One of the things that we see in kind of all of the characters at one point or another is a love of baseball or baseball paraphernalia. When we first meet Tick, he's having a nightmare and he meets the Princess of Mars from the John Carpenter books, and he's saved from a monster by Jackie Robinson. And then Jackie Robinson sort of becomes this like spirit of the story, even in seeing like somebody wearing a baseball shirt or baseball cap. And later in the series, he ends up being his own Patronus. He's heard stories from his dad since he was little that on the night of the Tulsa riots, he and his friend were rescued by Jackie Robinson or a guy that looked like Jackie Robinson. And he was always like, that's outlandish. But when he sees the scene, he's like, wait a minute, I can't stand, we can't wait for him to show up. I'll do it, I'll be Jackie Robinson. So he ends up being his own Patronus, which I super love. I will bring up more about baseball in the subsequent episode because I want to talk about Dee and Hippolyta and just other things we see that have to do with baseball. I also want to kind of draw some parallels with Tick and Jesse Owens, just this kind of boy next door. A lot of people don't see black men as the boy next door, they see them as entertainment. But you know, Jesse Owens was this wholesome boy next door who just happened to be black, and you know, the Olympics, what's more American than making Hitler mad?
Hans, are we the baddies?
Letitia Lewis! We're gonna talk about her now.
Damn it, girl, you're gonna trash us!
My name's not girl, it's Letitia Lewis.
So Letty is our love interest. She's our heroine. But I think what's great about her is, again, this could be her story. It's not necessarily just Tick's story. She is another person that you could follow and have the narrative be about her. So they really kind of amp up her change, her evolution through her clothing. And I love it. Okay, so she signifies death and rebirth. First time we meet her, she just blows into town. She goes up on stage with her sister and kind of tries to steal the show a little bit, but like not really being really aware of it. But I mean, they have fun, it's fine. And she's wearing just this great flashy outfit. She looks super beautiful. And when we see her get ready to go on the road trip with the guys, she's wearing just like, you know, bright lipstick and all these outfits. She's got, she's got a couple outfit changes. Yeah, she's got a couple of outfit changes, which you don't need to have a couple of outfit changes on a road trip when the guys are just kind of like comfy or whatever. So when they end up at the Artem house and she wakes up, she has a dress up montage, and everybody loves a good vintage dress up montage. So having her like spin around the entire room to moving on up in all of these great outfits, just perfect. And it shows kind of how frivolous she is. She's not mean, she's not rude, but she is self-centered, and a lot of young people are. She's a young woman who's gone off to kind of seek her fortune in the world, but everything is kind of about her.
You like?
And so when she comes out and she's wearing this absolutely over the top, like equestrian look, it's the only thing you can pay attention to, and she knows it. Like, she doesn't say it, but you know that she's happy that everyone's like,
Good Lord, Letitia.
okay. She dies. When she comes back to life, she's changed. Her evolution from self-centered, frivolous woman of the world to person with faith in people and faith as in religion it's subtle until it's not. Like, she does still wear a lot of flashy things, and usually when the opportunity arises, like when she goes on the adventure with Montrose and Tick, their like Goonies, their Goonies Indiana Jones adventure, she's wearing this like full body jumpsuit that reminds me so much of Gadget from Rescue Rangers, and it doesn't look like something that she was just like, gotta throw this on because I'm gonna be in a cave spelunking. She was just like, this is my adventure outfit. But everything else is a little bit cozier. Like, there's a couple scenes like when she's in the basement and they're trying to get rid of all of the spirits, and she's just wearing like just a shirt and pants. It's not flashy, it looks comfortable. There are a couple other scenes where she's not flashy, it's just comfortable. But I think it signifies her journey of realizing there's other stuff to do and other people in the world. She is the bad things about her mother. Her mom was neglectful and abusive and bad, and so she ran away. She physically ran away, and the way she could get attention is to be the center of attention, have people like her and think she's cool and pretty, and what better way to do that than go on adventures and dress nice. I would say that her entire style is very of the moment, it's very en vogue. So she wears things that don't necessarily always look like they're from the era. Some things kind of look like they might be from a little bit in the future. And since this world kind of plays fast and loose with time and dimensions, it makes sense. So I think it's a wise choice to make one character be that way and have it be her because of how much she grows and changes. Another thing we notice about her kind of like changing as a person is her death and rebirth from the flames. She's reborn. So she dies physically, and then later she has, I guess symbolically, she could have died when she's in the riots and the house around her is on fire and she just walks out of it. She walks down the street and the city's on fire. She comes back here and she's got the book and she's reborn as someone who can protect her baby, protect her man, protect her loved ones, protect her sister. So she dies physically and she dies spiritually. And in both instances, she's reborn as something new. And the last thing I want to talk about with Letitia Lewis, is her lemonade moment when those white supremacists are messing with her new house and she's sick and tired of it and she's having this fun party and she's got her cool sapphire colored dress on and she's just like, I'm done with this. And again, we get our baseball fix and she takes that bat and she just beats everything, but like the dress is just the motion of the fringe as she's breaking those windows. It's just that little bit more detail, and I love it so much. So now we get to George Freeman, and George is Tick's uncle. He is one side of two things that could have come from his father. His father was an abusive person. He ends up being the opposite. He is wholesome masculinity. He's a loving family man. He's gentle. He's learned. He's calm. He supports everybody around him, and he just wants everything to be good and safe. I love that he looks like a dad. He always has this like button-down shirt or a sweater, almost always in a tie and braces. he looks approachable. He looks sweet and kind. That is also part of his doing the Negro travel guide, the look of the acceptable Negro. And on the one hand, we see him as a dad. On the other hand, the nicer he looks, the less of a threat he is when he's out on the road, so it keeps him safe. It's another kind of bit of armor for him. And it's one of those things that unless you're familiar with it or you've lived it yourself, you wouldn't necessarily think about that watching him as a character. When George wakes up at the Artem house, his like dream of like, I'm gonna wake up and everything's gonna be perfect is him in a library surrounded by books, just like his nephew. He's a big geek, but he likes different genres of fiction than his nephew. But again, he encourages and loves everybody. So he's just like, you read what you like, nephew, and I'm gonna read what I like. But he's in this really comfortable looking, expensive looking robe. But that's it, like that's the fanciest thing he wears the entire time. Second to last of the main characters, I'm gonna talk about Montrose Freeman, who is Tick's dad. We know that their father was abusive, he was cruel, and he was the reason why Montrose couldn't really be his authentic self. And of course, it's a product of the time, but people also don't want to be abused, and we have two ways of working through it. We've got George, who just became the opposite, and then we have Montrose, who's stuck in his trauma. So instead of trying to uplift his son, he did what he thought was right, and he did the same thing to his son. He's toxic masculinity, this idea that men are supposed to be a certain way, and so he also abuses his son to make sure he's not too soft, which here could also mean not gay. He did genuinely want to be a father. He needed to be a father, but he couldn't break the cycle of abuse. He hides his true self, whereas George gets to be his true self. Montrose is a gay man living in the 50s, and between a lot of toxicity around masculinity for just men in the 50s in general, and also in the Black community, he didn't really have a chance. So the fact that they took the risk of having him come out, it was an interesting choice, and it was a brave choice, because not a lot of shows would have dealt with it the way it would have been done at the time. They would have wanted to have it be this happy thing, but Tick's uncomfortable and he's mad. It causes them to have a lot of really difficult conversations, but as he starts opening up, as he starts being his authentic self, you see him letting down walls. So in the beginning, when we meet Montrose, he's dressed sort of like a mixture of both Tick and then like lazy day George, but flashier colors. And he's wearing a bright shirt when he's like, I didn't need to be rescued. And we see him wearing these flashy things, like flashy colors. The outfits themselves are pretty subdued. They look like they're not super outdated, but like dad clothes. So he's had them for a while. He's not trying to dress top of fashion. But his clothing does get a little bit more subdued as the series goes on and as he sort of opens up himself. And when he, Letty, and Tick go back to the Tulsa riots, they are wearing clothing of the era, and he's not super flashy, he's just wearing a nice suit. And then all three of them are wearing their own shoes from their time. I love that little touch. I think it's pretty great. The last thing I want to draw attention to is the fashion in the episode where Montrose is with his partner Sammy, and Sammy he's a man and he dresses like a man and he presents male, and then you see the underground drag scene, and this switch kind of goes off, he's really comfortable in his skin. He's not scared of who he is, especially when he's with his friends. There's that transformation sequence when Montrose is in the apartment with everybody else, and the entire time I'm just clenching my teeth because I'm waiting for a hate crime to happen. And it never does. And I've never taken such a big, deep breath in all my life. I've just, but seeing him let loose in the bar with all the people that are just like him, I think that was probably the best fashion moment for Montrose, because it wasn't really that big for him, but everybody around him made him feel safe. The last character of the main crew I'm going to talk about is Ruby Baptiste, and she is Letitia Lewis's sister. She also changes into a character named Hilary Davenport. Like with Montrose and George, it's important to talk about Letty and Ruby and their parentage. George and Montrose are both the good and the bad of the father, and Ruby and Letty are running away physically and running away emotionally of the mother. Ruby is responsible. She is motherly. She is a little bit conservative in what she does and how she dresses. She's fashionable, like what she's wearing looks very cute, but it's fairly conservative. It looks like what a housewife would wear, except for when she's singing.
I got a guy who's always late. Anytime we have a date, but I love him. Yes, I love him.
When she's singing, she gets sexy and she like puts on much tighter dresses and shows some boob, and there's a dress she wears that's covered in sequins, and it is completely opposite of what she is in her day-to-day life. And what she strives to do in her day-to-day life is have a job at Marshall Fields. She just wants to be a sales girl. And she is the epitome of just being the normal American woman in the 50s. She has to bail her sister out all the time. She's fairly put upon, so she doesn't really get to take time for herself or do anything for herself. So when given the opportunity to run away emotionally, she jumps at it. Obviously, with some trepidation, but she does it anyway. When she transforms into Hilary Davenport, who is a white woman, she dresses fairly similarly. She still has that kind of 50s housewife look to her, but like a little bit more expensive looking. And I think it's because her partner, who I will discuss in the next episode, buys things for her, gets her things. And we see later there is a closet, and it's got clothing for her partner and then mysterious women's clothing, and it can mean several things, which again I'll discuss in the next episode. She uses the ability to run away emotionally as Hilary Davenport to get a job. She runs away by being somebody else and putting on someone else's skin to do the thing she wanted to do.
How was the first day of your dream job, Miss Davenport?
Well, it's better than being someone's damn charwoman.
I find her journey frustrating, sad, and super interesting, because it makes you think, if you were given the opportunity to make that choice, would you? And what would you do with it? As I discussed before with Letty, the first time we meet Ruby is when she's on stage at a block party and Letty runs up and they sing together. She is channeling Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the mother of modern rock and roll, and she's just shimmying and shaking in her sexy dress. And her hair's great, she's got a flower in it, and she's got her guitar, and she's very free. And the only time we really see her free is when she's singing or when she's with her partner later. It makes you think, can she only be free when she is escaping mentally because she's losing herself in the music, or she is in somebody else's body? One time we see her wearing a maid outfit, and it's this kind of like Aunt Jemima, the help stereotype of a black maid. And so she blends in, nobody thinks anything of her. Nobody pays her any mind. It's the only time we see her kind of playing a part that she doesn't want to play. All of the other parts she plays of the motherly friend or sister, she makes that choice, but this is the one time like she's doing it and you can tell how uncomfortable she is because it's just not her. When we see her as Hillary for the first time, she's disheveled, her hair's a mess. She's wearing very expensive looking pajamas, really pretty silk robe, but she is a mess and she's acting crazy, and the police still believe her and try to protect her over a child who was trying to help her because he's black.
What? No! The cops?
What? No!
They side with the white woman before they listen to or believe any of the black people around who are acting very normal. This continues to be a theme, and it's interesting that they chose Ruby to be the character for this. Now I'm going to talk about just side characters. They're part of the scenery. They build the world by kind of letting you know what it's like to have been in the Jim Crow era. We have first the Sons of Adam, which are the cultists that are trying to get Tick to create some magic thing, whatever, just watch it. And they are kind of like Shriners and other kind of secret organizations that just like white guys through history seem to like. Kind of skull and bones. They're like, the hoods are very reminiscent of the KKK. The embroidery on the robes have the secret language on it. And then on the back of the robes is also symbols from their language, the language of Adam.
You must construct additional pylons.
We have a scene where all of the men are in their fancy man outfits. They're all in tuxedos eating fancy food until it's, you know, the main guy's insides. It's fine, just watch it. Anyway, and we have George talk about the fact that he was also a Mason and how he knows about secret organizations and, you know, how they're kind of all the same, but they were still separate. You had to be in like the special offshoot for Black Masons. There wasn't mixing. So you can tell all the men are uncomfortable with these two black men being in their midst, even though they need something from them. I do want to say too, if you don't know a ton about the creation of the KKK, there is a really good couple of episodes. It's a two-parter, I think, Behind the Bastards, and I will link that in the description.
My father and his associates would never fraternize with the Klan. They're too poor.
It was like a frat where they would mess with people. They're like, they were essentially just internet trolls, but in the real world. And then they got bored with it, and then it got worse. So, yeah, anyway, I'm gonna link that in the description because this is also very obviously what that's based on. Now I'm gonna talk about the Sundown Town racists. One choice that they made that I thought was really interesting was the group of guys that are chasing them out of town are wearing red braces. And that's something that modern white supremacists wear to signify to others that they're part of the same group. So the red braces, red laces kind of thing. And that wasn't necessarily something that would have been back then, but to a modern eye, it's a cue that these are people to not be trusted. Plus, brown shirts, just a couple little subtle things for you to look out for. Plus, we've got the police, and we've got the idea of hiding in plain sight. You know you can't trust them, even though you're supposed to be able to trust them because they're the police. But there they are, hiding in plain sight. They could stop you at any moment. They could kill you at any moment. Another example of hiding in plain sight is Letty's neighbors. It's just a bunch of clean-cut dudes and women who are messing with them. They look like somebody you could go borrow sugar from, but you clearly can't. They just look very ordinary. And it's a good choice to show that because it's not like all people with those sorts of sensibilities are gonna wear a shirt that says, "I hate your race, get out of my neighborhood." They're gonna look like John and Brenda down the street. Lastly, I'm gonna talk about Artem, which is the place that they go to in search of Tick's father when he goes missing. It looks out of time, and it's not necessarily Amish looking, kind of more like Mennonites. It's a little bit more modern, but you can tell that they don't really have a lot of, not even technology, but just newer things. The kids are playing with a wicker man, well, a wicker woman, and if you pause on it, the way the string goes around it, it looks like Aunt Jemima or like a mammy. And I don't know if that's on purpose, but I paused on it several times. Now to ask you, do Easter eggs in shows and movies make you want to do more research on the subject? Because I know it does for me. And when I noticed that there were like Gordon Parks references or James Baldwin references.
I find myself, not for the first time, in the position of a kind of Jeremiah.
It made me stop and start looking things up on my phone, which, anyway. Do you do that? And those of you who have seen the show, do you think that their personalized wardrobes helped kind of build their character? Or is it something you didn't really notice? Let me know. Comments. Put your answers there. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this episode of Cinema Tire. Like I said, Lovecraft Country is one of my favorite shows of 2020, which is really saying something because media was on point last year. There were so many great shows, and I know I'm gonna have a lot to catch up on making episodes because I wanna talk about everything, but that just means there's gonna be a whole bunch of content for you. So join me next time for the second part of Lovecraft Country, and you guys are awesome. If you found it informative or fun, please like the video. Please subscribe if you're thinking about it, and I hope to see you next time. So we're gonna talk about Letitia effing Lewis. Nope, I'm gonna swear and you bleep me.